Season 2 of House of the Dragon is finally here. In this video, I'll break down episode 1, going over Easter eggs, hidden lore, and anything you might have missed. Without any more rambling, let's get into it. The season begins with a new set of opening credits. Last season, the credits displayed the bloodline and family tree of House Targaryen, while this season shows a tapestry detailing the history of the house. It begins with the Valyrian ancestors of House Targaryen performing some kind of blood magic ritual, which shows how they originally used blood magic to bond themselves to dragons. Next, we see Daenys the Dreamer on Dragonback fleeing from Valyria. Daenys Targaryen had prophetic visions of the future and foresaw the end of Valyria, and she managed to convince her house to leave before the Doom. Following this, we see the Doom of Valyria, which saw the end of the Valyrian freehold and the deaths of pretty much every dragon. Next, we see Aegon the Conqueror and his two sister wives, Rhaenys and Visenya, riding their three dragons, Balerion, Meraxes, and Vhagar. The next panel depicts Aegon's conquest of Westeros. Specifically, we see the Field of Fire, where House Targaryen defeated House Gardener, who were the kings of the Reach. This central figure is probably Harren the Black, the Ironborn king who built Harrenhal, but refused to bend the knee to Aegon, so instead Aegon destroyed him. Next comes House Tully, Arryn, and Stark, all bending the knee to Aegon, followed by the Red Keep. We see Maegor the Cruel, who ruled as a tyrant, but eventually died under mysterious circumstances and was found impaled on the Iron Throne. Following Maegor is King Jacaerys and Queen Alysanne, and their two dragons, Silverwing and Vermithor. We saw Vermithor last season when Daemon primed him to accept a new rider. And now we get into the more current timeline, with the Great Council of 101 AC, which saw Viserys made heir over Rhaenys. Following this, Queen Alicent arrives at Rhaenyra's wedding, both women dressed to represent the two sides of House Targaryen that are forming, Team Green and Team Black. Next, we see King Aegon on the Iron Throne and Queen Rhaenyra on the Dragonstone throne. Below Rhaenyra is a black hand sending out dragons, referencing how Rhaenyra sent her two sons, Jace and Luke, on their dragons as messengers to gather support for her cause, while Team Green sent ravens. The final image shows a depiction of Luke's death at the hands of Aemond and Vhagar, which we saw at the end of Season 1. The tapestry then opens up onto the Iron Throne and shows there is plenty more history yet to be written. I would expect with each episode new images will be added to the tapestry, just as new Targaryens were added to the bloodline in the opening credits for Season 1. The first few scenes introduce us to the North and Cregan Stark. Cregan has Ice, the Valyrian steel greatsword of House Stark, strapped to his back. Cregan speaks with Jace, and he mentions that decades ago when King Jacaerys and Queen Alysanne came to the wall, neither of their dragons dared to cross beyond it to the north. In the books, it is only Queen Alysanne who ventured to the wall. She attempted 3 times to fly her mount Silverwing beyond the wall, but each time the dragon refused, despite having never previously refused a command. When the wall was constructed, ancient runes and magics were etched into the foundations, and the wall became not just a physical barrier, but also a magical barrier. While this magical barrier stops the White Walkers from crossing, fans speculate that these same magics prevent dragons from flying north. With winter on its way, Cregan cannot spare any men, but promises 2,000 old greybeards to Jace. In the books, this group is known as the Winter Wolves, a force of old men who choose to march south to fight. Winter approaches, and instead of being a burden or another mouth to feed for their kin, they decide to march south. The Winter Wolves are led by a great warrior who has some epic moments in the Dance of Dragons, so hopefully the show does not cut him. Jace and Cregan are both in their youth, but despite being young, Cregan has already had an interesting life. In the books, a few years before the Dance of Dragons civil war, House Stark had a civil war of its own. When his father died, Cregan was too young to rule the north, so instead his uncle, Bernard Stark, ruled as Cregan's regent. When the time came, Bernard was slow to relinquish control of the north to his nephew, so Cregan rose up to claim Winterfell from his uncle. Cregan imprisoned his uncle and his cousins, and through this crucible he grew into a strong leader who understands a firm hand is required to rule. It would have been interesting to see Cregan touch on this subject and potentially offer some advice to Jace, who now faces a civil war of his own. Back on Dragonstone, Rhaenys returns on Meleys. Last season, she was tasked with patrolling the shipping lanes that feed into King's Landing in an effort to aid Team Black's blockade of the city. Daemon wants to ride with Rhaenys to King's Landing to take out Vhagar and Aemond. Currently, they are the greatest power in the realm, but Daemon can't take on Vhagar alone, so he tries to convince Rhaenys to join him with melees. However, Rhaenys only listens to the Queen. For the last few days, Rhaenyra, mounted on Syrax, has been searching for Luke's body, and until she returns, Team Black have been on standby mode, much to Daemon's annoyance. Meanwhile, on Driftmark, Corlys Velarion's fleet is being repaired. Last season, he was wounded fighting against the Triarchy, who have now returned years after their initial defeat in Season 1. Among the vessels being repaired is the Sea Snake, Corlys's personal ship. In his youth, Corlys Velaryon sailed the Sea Snake all around the world on 9 great voyages. From these adventures, he amassed astonishing wealth, making him the richest man in Westeros. HBO are developing an animated spin-off set to cover these 9 great voyages. It is here we are introduced to Alan of Hull. Alan presents Corlys with a blade that Corlys had commissioned for Lucerys. But with Lucerys now dead, it is unclear who Corlys's heir is now. When Corlys was wounded, it was Alan who rescued him from the water, and Corlys feels that he owes Alan a debt. This scene gives some hints about who exactly Alan is, and indicates that he might have a much bigger role to play. Back in King's Landing, the Greens have installed scorpions, the same type of weaponry that Euron used to kill one of Daenerys' dragons in Game of Thrones. A scorpion was also used during Aegon's conquest of Westeros to kill Meraxes, the mount of Rhaenys Targaryen, but more on this later. Next, we see Helaena, who says she is afraid, not of the dragons or the war, but the rats. Last season, it was heavily implied that Helaena was a dragon dreamer. Some members of House Targaryen have prophetic visions of the future, like how Viserys saw that he would have a son who was destined to rule, or how Aegon the Conqueror had a dream of the threat of the White Walkers in the north. In Season 1, Helaena demonstrated knowledge of the future. She predicted that Aemond would have to lose an eye to claim a dragon. These dragon dreams are never straightforward and are difficult to interpret. From her dreams, Helaena has developed a fear of the rats in King's Landing and is terrified of an impending tragedy, but due to the nature of the dreams, she does not exactly know what is coming. But we find out later that she likely saw glimpses of the Ratcatcher and the death of her son. Alicent and Cole are seen being intimate multiple times in the episode, which is extremely hypocritical of Alicent. One of the reasons that she turned against Rhaenyra was because Rhaenyra flaunted the law by sleeping with Cole and Harwin, but now Alicent flaunts those same laws sleeping with Cole. In this scene, we get an early glimpse of the Ratcatcher. Notice that Aegon's chair has Valyrian steel laid into the seat. It is here we get a glimpse of Aegon's true nature, as he wields power over Tywin Lannister, but at least for now he is kept in check by Alicent and Otto. During the Green Council, we learn that they are mustering the armies of House Baratheon, Lannister and Hightower, but to combat against the Valyrian blockade, they need more naval might, and require a new master of ships. Dalton Greyjoy's name is put forward. In the books, Dalton was known as the Red Kraken and wields a Valyrian steel sword named Nightfall. Aemond joins the council, and it is clear that the younger generation are keen to send the dragons into the field and take a more aggressive approach to the conflict, while the older generation urge caution and a more diplomatic approach. Alicent and Larys speak, and it is made clear that Larys has killed all of the spies who worked for Mysaria and replaced them with his own. Alicent then bathes, attempting to scrub herself clean, symbolizing that she feels dirty from her actions, but no matter how hard she scrubs, there is blood on her hands. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra finds part of Arax's wing and Lucerys' cloak, confirming to herself that Luke is truly dead. In her grief, Syrax feels Rhaenyra's pain, likely through their dragon bond. This magical link causes the pair to share experiences and emotions as one. Aegon then addresses several petitions, and it is made clear that he wants to be loved by the small folk, but Otto and Larys caution him against being so open. In the background of this scene, we also see the Ratcatcher again. There is also a pillar of King Viserys ready for installation. Each pillar in the throne room is carved into the likeness of one of the previous Targaryen kings. There is a pillar for Aegon the Conqueror, Aenys, Maegor, Jacaerys, and now Viserys. We hear another petition from a smith named Hugh. Hugh is likely an important book character who we are sure to see more of. Larys then speaks with Aegon and begins to plant the seed in Aegon's mind that it might be time for a firmer hand than Otto Hightower. Meanwhile, Alicent and Otto come to an understanding that they need to maintain control over the younger generation and decide to unite in purpose. The Valyrian blockade stops a ship heading from King's Landing, and aboard they find Mysaria. She previously had a relationship with Daemon, but eventually grew a network of spies in King's Landing. However, at the end of season 1, Larys attempted to have her killed and her network was largely destroyed. When Rhaenyra arrives back on Dragonstone, we see this massive dragon skull in the background. This is likely the skull of Meraxes, the mount of Rhaenys, Aegon's sister wife. During Aegon's conquest, Meraxes was struck in the eye by a scorpion bolt and died. Now that Rhaenyra is back, she has one single command: kill Aemon Targaryen. So Daemon leverages Myzaria's freedom in exchange for her knowledge of King's Landing. A funeral is then held for Lucerys, with Rhaena being particularly upset. Remember, she was betrothed to Luke in season 1. Daemon then dons his up-to-no-good hood and travels to King's Landing. He speaks with a gold cloak. Remember, in season 1, Daemon commanded them for a time, and some of them are still loyal to him. Daemon recruits the Ratcatcher that we have seen a few times throughout the episode, and convinces him to assassinate Aemon Targaryen. Daemon sends the gold cloak along with the Ratcatcher. The Ratcatcher knows his way through the secret tunnels throughout the Red Keep that were known as Maegor's tunnels. When Maegor was king, he oversaw the construction of the Red Keep and ordered that a labyrinth of tunnels were built throughout the keep. When the works were completed, Maegor killed every single craftsman who worked on the project, so that the secrets of the tunnels were his and his alone. Since Maegor's time, some of the tunnels seem to have been rediscovered. For example, Daemon used them to sneak Rhaenyra out of the keep in episode 4, and Rhaenys used them to escape in episode 9. Eventually, Blood and Cheese make it to Aemon's chambers, but find it empty. Instead, they come upon Helaena and her children Jacaerys and Jacaerys, Aegon's heir. Blood and Cheese brutally kill Jacaerys and take his head, while Helaena flees with Jacaerys. She ends up in Alicent's chambers, where we see her and Cole clapping cheeks. In the books, the event is a bit more horrific. Helaena has 3 children, a daughter, Jacaerys, and 2 sons, Jacaerys and Maelor. Blood and Cheese force Helaena to choose which of her sons she wants to lose. Helaena chooses Maelor instead of her firstborn son and heir to the Iron Throne. Cheese then tells Maelor that his mother wants him dead, traumatizing the boy for life. But instead of killing Maelor, they kill Jacaerys.